Hello and welcome back. I guess more to us if you've been sitting in chat this whole time. Thank you for sticking around. Uh,
Yes.
we are Russell Brandon and Danielle Costello from Games Roundtable, an ALA subcommittee focused on games and gaming, and we are moving into our next little piece here. Which this bit we were just in Librarians Attempt Games lag. We are now in RTRT Roundtable, in which the two of us will be a roundtable chatting about um, what we in this case what we just did and kind of some of the things that we were having discussions about during the game.
With less, firefights between us. We could just focus on the talking. Because I'm
uh,
sure, I think both of us had moments where we're like, we were going somewhere, but I'm being
it
attacked by
was
spells.
definite. There were definite like it was this train of thought that was happening that then just would evaporate because this other thing has distracted me.
Yes, yes. But yeah, so this is our program where we bring together librarians, chat about games and libraries, and all the ways we can bring play into our spaces. Just a reminder, this is a charity stream, so we are supporting Extra Life and a day-long event where we're going to be playing games and then talking about this great cause. So donations are in the chat. Nightbot will take care of us, and if you hit bang donation, it will bring up the link so you can donate. Please, please, please. It's a wonderful cause, and we're so excited to be able to do this weekend for y'all.
Indeed, indeed.
So today's topic, in general, is we're going to be a continuation of storytelling, themes, lore in games, why that gives texture and granularity to games, and why that makes them so fun. So, I guess we can just get started. I think you can definitely have games that don't have storytelling aspects. You can have games that are very ace like kind of abstract and don't have it's just the mechanic, like where
Mm-hmm.
this thing happens to this piece and then you do like four other things, or it could be like a dexterity game where you're just, like Jenga, trying to make this like a tumble tower move up higher and higher as you're pulling out pieces, that kind of thing. But I think lots of games in general have stories, or at least some kind of theming to them, that make them really fun and impressive.
Yeah, the idea of narrative was always a really interesting like conversation for like academic game design. So we touched briefly on like gamification conversations earlier, but that sort of idea of narrative as being like the question of whether or not um oh my gosh, I love that in chat. Fan fiction idea storytelling about the game of Tetris. I mean, but that's the interesting thing is like we would always have these conversations about the sort of different components of what a game is, and like this idea of narrative being that this question of is it something that you impose on mechanics, or is it something that like the mechanics inform, or is it even necessary like beyond that, like the idea of like checkers, like you don't need to play as a
There,
function
there,
of
yeah, there's no reason why like checkers needs to have something, but some of the mechanics inherently kind of start. I feel storytelling is a very natural human behavior where we're like, oh, slowly the red is encroaching upon black's territory. They're taking over. They're colonizing this area, or chess obviously has like pieces that represent this like either historical figures or kind of the analogous nature of like a knight's a knight
mm-hmm.
or king queen, that lends itself to kind of humans making those stories, even without the mechanics, like, or even without the the designer theming things in there. It's like I feel a very natural thing for us to like, I'm sure somebody has made a Tetris fan fiction. I'm sure somebody has made like Tetris, like this the narrative of I think there was a version of Tetris that was very vibesy, that like felt like the story is you just being chill and relaxed. Like there, like I don't remember one of the latest version of Tetris was just very nice. Like not maybe not storytelling, but thematically kind of putting you into a particular headspace of good vibes. But on that, I want to kind of talk about. You mentioned mechanics and how that can lead to storytelling. I think one of my favorite things is the game Dread.
Mm-hmm.
Has the overall
You mentioned
horror.
Jenga, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And the tumble tower is a mechanic used to create storytelling moments of intense anxiety because the tumble tower falling makes us all feel very, very anxious, and that's lends itself to storytelling horror aspects. So within the game of Dread, there's rather than having a luck mechanic in general, like dice, there's the tumble tower. So if you want to make a move in Dread, if you want to do any action for your character, you take a piece and you move it to the top. And naturally, as the game progresses, as you get to the height of the story of the horror aspects, and you're finding the monster or you're running away, the tower becomes more wobbly, more kind of uh, less stable, and so that like the mechanic adds to the narrative, which I think is just one of the coolest things I've seen in a game do. So even while something cannot be thematic, I feel once again we can make that into story. We can make those like all those mechanics, like human nature is just primed for storytelling and making narratives that make sense.
It kind of, I mean, it becomes this question of like the so physical mechanics versus like cognitive mechanics. So like
Mhm.
the Jenga tower in Dread, physically creating this like decision space where like you are having to, engage with this thing that then, prompts a, kind of, I mean, kind of like, and I'm going,
Yeah,
deep
this is
into the
what
weeds,
Roundtable's for.
but the idea being that we always immediately jump to the idea of a like virtual reality experience or like a fully like simulated experience as being something where you're like strapped into a chair or you have all the information being funneled directly into your brain. When like functionally using the Jenga tower to basically prompt an emotional response is that that
Mhm.
is exactly what like simulations want to do. They
Mhm.
want to create a
Hack.
genuine experience of something, and in like that case it's like such a beautiful way to like use a tool. So like in
Mhm.
that case the Jenga tower, to actually like prompt that response from people. But then on top of that you have the sort of cognitive experience of games where maybe you're planning something or you're seeing like interactions between decisions that you make, and that ends up actually representing what the narrative of the game is. I'm thinking about like deck building games, how like
Mhm.
those can be so cool when like I'm thinking about Dominion, um,
Oh yeah.
when you like the smithy letting you draw 3 cards. It just
Mhm.
feels good story wise because you can imagine like, oh, I've hired a smithy, he's making me stuff,
Oh yeah.
and that sort of those sort of
I
yeah.
I feel this similarly if you think about Magic and the notorious blue deck, and the way that like it's like, yes, of course that's just like a counter spell mage, like just in the way that blue is control, and like a lot of the blue kind of cards are very magically kind of driven, and it's just like, yes, there's magic in other things, but blue feels particularly like, that kind of wizard in control, a sage that knows, how to manipulate the laws of nature and all those good things.
And yeah, and that bearing out in the play. And we've got a cool chat,
Yeah.
from E Brown. There's an interesting connection where storytelling aids in memory. I wonder if there's a way that connection is used in games, maybe in the way video game tutorials are directed. That's such a good point. Like the idea being that uh, using tutorializing to basically catch people up with a story. I mean, we kind of bears out in the Destiny
Yeah,
like
the
that. Just
Destiny game.
yeah, just like it. Again, it kind of it. I mean, to a degree, I guess also mechanically, if we go even further down, like into Destiny 2 as a game, you have the sort of the distinction between the types of enemies as well as sort of
Hmm.
introduced story wise. The sort of hordes of the hive versus the long distance of the fallen. That's why you shouldn't skip
You
cutscenes.
shouldn't. No.
Yeah, and that motivation, that's such a good point, too.
Hmm.
I mean, the idea of narrative, even in itself, as a way to prompt people to play your game because they're
Oh
just
yeah.
like, oh, I want to figure out who this person is, or.
Well, if you think of the beginning of Stardew Valley, like there's that entire scene about like how you get your farm and what kind of the goals, and part of both the goal I think of the game is to just do whatever you want, relax. But that's enhanced through the storytelling of the tutorial, where you're in kind of atmospherically, it shows the horrible work life that you had. Literally a skeleton in one of the cubes, like there's somebody that died at work. And the idea of like Stardew is to just, relax and enjoy the experience, because you have a set, like the one of the mechanics is set energy, so you can only choose exactly how much you want. You have to make good choices of what you want to do, or you could just do nothing. It's
Just
like
chill.
it's just letting you know you don't work forever. You can, unlike our, round table, that's our hashtag, work forever. But yeah, so both the kind of mechanics and the narrative enforce the, kind of what the game's trying to prompt itself as, which is a relaxing, kind of exploration game. It's a little bit farming, but you don't have to work at it forever. You can just relax as well.
Too relatable. Too
Yes.
relatable.
Oh,
And it's like
yes.
anyone, I feel like anyone who plays Stardew Valley or any sort of comfort core game, like, we always have that moment where I always think of this comic that I saw. It was like somebody playing on their Switch and the light goes, or like the screen turns off and they see a reflection of themselves. But it's always that moment of just like, should I be actually farming right now?
Although
um,
it's a lot more complicated. I have guarded, and I'm like, oh man, if only it were easy as Stardew
yeah,
Valley.
right. Or even just like that sort of vibrancy of it. Um, but the thankful, I think one of the things that like makes a game like that so easy to go back to and to play is because it does remind you that, like, hey, that thing that, like, playing this game is a way that you are, hey,
Mhm.
just chill out.
Just chill out. It's okay.
Just chill
You could
out.
do whatever you want. You don't have to farm. I love that there's no, while there's the energy meter, it's not a survival game. um
Mm-hmm.
while like there are other games in similar genre that like you have to eat, you have to drink, it's just like you can literally just do nothing and all is well. And so I appreciate that kind of aspect of it. It's like reinforcing. Um but yeah, I think one of the best things about our collections, as far as libraries go, is that games pair very well with the rest of our collections in the storytelling aspect. I can
Yeah.
do read-alikes very easily with, like, if you want a Destiny style game, Destiny falls into so many genres of science fiction, fantasy, high fantasy, all these different things. If somebody likes a video game, you can very easily go to, like, okay, here's the books I recommend, or here's maybe a TTRPG I recommend. There's like nice intersectionality with our collections in that way.
Yeah, and the idea being that if I can, I think it provides a service to the patron to like deepen or broaden that sort of exposure as well. The idea being that, you find a book that relates to a game that you played, and that's, I mean, it's not just going to be the exact same thing. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
granted, I guess there's like, um but even so, I mean, like, books, Diablo 2 books, or like, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there are Destiny books
Oh
in the
yeah,
sense
straight
that
from.
the lore, and so like
Yeah.
you can read them kind of like books, and they work and they're very good. But the idea being that it's still going to be a different experience, which like can then lead to even like more different media
Mhm.
and that sort of
Or
exploding
kind of
outward.
see how all the media interconnects in the themes that they love to, like. So we had we were playing Destiny earlier, and one of the things for the newest game was that there is an event that has a headless horseman. And where, like, so somebody who might not have read, like, it feels like Headless Horseman should be
That's
within
a
the
good
collective
point.
conscious enough,
Yeah, yeah.
but you can go and you could be like, oh look, here's Sleepy Hollow, and like it adds depth. And each of these games, like reading material like, Isaac Asimov, or like AI stuff, or watching Blade Runner, adds to the joy of playing a science fiction game like Destiny, because you're seeing where
Ooh,
people are drawing
yeah.
their really good, like, inspirations from, and then you can kind of see how they've spun it, or they've enhanced it, or they've changed it. And so I think in general, reading and watching and playing all together creates, this wonderful experience of deep immersion within a genre that makes it just so rewarding, like kind of like a feedback loop of, if I read this, then I learn more about this, which makes me more knowledgeable in this, which, kind of all around more for fun.
That's good stuff.
Which is what we
Yeah.
can give to our patrons and be like, look, this is why we should. So admit, like, I know there's always people like that struggle with their library admins or like, why should we have games? It's like, one, it's part of the collective conscious.
Yeah.
If you're not playing games, you're not understanding where people are drawing the rest of their media from. Because if you, for example, there are entire genre of manga, manhwa, light novels that are based on kind of isekaiing into a game or portal fantasy into a game. If you don't know these kinds of games or like the games they're referencing, then you're going to have an entire genre that makes less sense than if you understand the game as well. So everything gets connected eventually because people who love science fiction love all the things within science fiction, not just, the books or the movies or the plays, but also the games. So, one, it makes our collections better, it makes our patrons more kind of knowledgeable in those areas they want to dive deeply into. Ooh, and then from the chat, I wonder if anyone has studied the effects of playing games on people's ability to imagine more abstract, less visual stories like novels. Academic gamers, here's your free thesis. Yes, please. Anyone take
That's
all of
pretty
our ideas and
cool.
run with them, and then tag us at all of our stuff. I will. They are in the chat. I will do a plug for us always. We are the Games and Gaming Roundtable of the American Library Association. We love talking about games, and we love being nerdy and academic and scholarly. So we're at a fun. I want a weird and fun and amazing intersection of all these good things where we get to talk about all of our loves. So yeah, I love it. But yeah, I feel like we struggle and it's like it's another form of human expression that should get as equal, you know, um, time in the spotlight for research and for space in our collections.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, and again, in general, as a medium, the idea being that in any circumstance when you are generating a thing, a book, a video, a movie, I mean, any sort of thing, you are telling some sort of story, or you are like, whether that story is trying to convince people of something or allow them to experience something or evoke some sort of emotion from someone. And it's just always so, it's really interesting because um, games and simulations really open up, I think, so much at once that it's kind of still this like seen as this very distinct.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it's such a varied tool and it's been used in a very specific way for. I mean, initially, but even then, I mean, it's just like the fact that games are somewhat frivolous is like in the same way that art is frivolous. I mean,
Like,
but not in a bad way. It's just like the meaning comes from the conversation about the thing or what conversation comes out of the thing. And
mhm.
like that idea of being able to generate an object. So like say I'm making a one-page RPG or say I'm making Destiny 2, both very different sort of workflows, but both of those things allow me as a player to generate something else, some sort of story and experience that like, in the case of Destiny 2, I live through, I get to run around as this thing versus a one page or a solo RPG where I'm literally like writing out and I'm imagining a thing.
Yeah.
Um,
I
yeah.
think going back to kind of the comment of the effects of video games on people's abilities to kind of imagine things and be things, I think that's the very unique aspect versus a lot of other media is with games we get to have agency over that story versus a lot of things the story somebody has created that story and it's happening versus video games either give the illusion of agency with some MMORPGs. Yes, there's a story we're following it, but how well do we execute that ending versus or going to games like RPGs again where we are the agents of the story, we are the agents of chaos that make the poor DM have to scramble around or kind of collaboratively we're still building the story together. And I think games give a that control that's not necessarily there unless you're a creator within those mediums, but kind of talking as the recipient of these mediums, kind of that's where I'm coming from is games that have that very unique ability to give us agency and
Yeah.
immediacy and like we are in it, which yes, I feel like cinema and books can do, but also games like we were playing I was playing Fallout and I made a decision where
100%.
um yeah, yeah,
They are
agency.
totally choose your own adventure. Those are totally games.
Yes, yes, just your image are delightful. But yeah, yeah. In Fallout, like I made the decision where it's like, oh, this guy has really cool armor. I guess I'm gonna kill him for armor. He looks like a bad guy, and then I come to realize that he's actually one of the good guys. But the game let me just do that, and I felt horrible. I was like,
Ooh.
I had to struggle with the like, oh, am I just killing people randomly for just my like? So there was a deep moment where I'm like, I exited out, pulled back 2 hours of the game because I hadn't saved in a while, and I was like, no, I those 2 hours are gone. I need to rethink my life because
Oh
that
my
was a
gosh.
bad those were bad choices, and so I think games give you that kind of yeah. Oh, I'm not a murder hobo. Well, I am a murder hobo. Let's be honest. I
Oh
play
dear.
Dungeons and Dragons. I've been bad. I've burned down taverns. I've done
Hey, I
things.
mean, to a degree, it's also that low stakes in terms of
Hmm.
the opportunity to evoke something or feel something. Yeah, everyone has their
And
path.
I
That's
think
great.
games give us the opportunity to both go to our basest instincts and be like just horrible without consequence of actually injuring another party, but then also think more deeply about it as well. It's like, is
Engage with
this
that
the
consequence
yeah,
responsibly, as
yes. It's
opposed
like,
to
is this
having.
exactly, exactly. Is this the kind of person I want to be? I can be mean to NPCs all day, every day, and choose the meaner options. But for me, what are the consequences? It doesn't matter necessarily what the world's consequences are, but is that the person I want to be? And so, like, that gives you the ability to reflect sometimes, like, kind of
And
if you want to go
I
that
mean,
path.
yeah, and if you want to, because you can also just not engage with that component of the game. You can literally
Yeah.
just play the game. I could, like we I kind of brought this up before, but like you can play Destiny where you are just clicking heads. That is the only thing you're doing. You are clicking heads, watching numbers pop up, and doing the thing. You do not have to read anything. You can
Hmm.
follow the map markers, and it will tell you which quest to go to,
Hmm.
and like all these sorts of things.
Skipping the lore.
Yeah, and so but you can still like engage with the game in that way, which is what is so interesting in terms of that agency, that those affordances that the design of a game allow for us is like a MMO game generating so many different things because you have these social affordances all the
Hmm.
way down to checkers, which is like
Yeah.
the affordances you can move in these directions
Well, and then
and
the
you have
social
one opponent.
constructs. Yeah, yeah. We still build social constructs within games that we play, like in person, in video games also. And I think there was a mention of Satanic Panic, and there's always, I feel, maybe not board games yet. We don't know how that's gonna fall out because I feel it's still kind of a newer media of the game. But video games and TTRPGs get lambasted. It's like, oh, is this looter shooter going to wreck America's, children's minds, or is this one going to cause people to do horrible cultish things? And in reality, games give us agency and choices, and then from those, like the ability to choose, we become, more thoughtful, I think, in the way we play the games. Or once again, we're still engaging we're choosing to engage in violence in a game, not violence in the real world, which is a great choice.
Mm.
Yes, if you want to engage in like, bad acts, do it in a game world where people aren't actually going to be hurt. Um, I say that against like non-player characters, not player characters. Don't be mean to player characters in games. That would those poor like noobs and souls that
I
are just
mean,
trying to learn the
in
game.
general, though, but the conversation regarding games as tools, the idea
Yeah.
that they, in the same way that they can be, taken advantage of, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of, the idea of the medium itself not necessarily being. I mean, they can also be used for great good. The idea of
Mm-hmm.
role playing action during therapy, during professional
Oh
therapy,
yeah.
like is such a great example of a game. You
Mm-hmm.
set up roles, you do that thing in a professional atmosphere. That is an example of it as a tool, and I think that yeah, a lot of the time that sort of conflation of the like the thing in general. It's like saying, yeah, oh man, it gets into some wild rhetorical
There's so
spaces.
much. Once again, we're gonna do a roundtable on the ethics of video games, TTRPGs. I think that'll be a really valuable one. But back into story. So, Russell, do
Oh
you
yeah.
have? We've talked about how much you love Destiny. Is there another game you love for story?
Man, story. I'd have to agree with you as far as the Fallout series is one like I love. I don't know so much about the new story, but I really that was one of the first real games that I engaged with, lore wise. Fallout 1 and 2. Um, but I think honestly, I really uh, what is a game that I like that basically gave me the ability to be a game master. I think for Dungeons and
Mm-hmm.
Dragons was the Baldur's Gate that
Ooh.
series, because I played a lot of that when I was a kid, and then but this was before I knew that D&D existed. Like I did
Mm-hmm.
not know what the thing was based on. Um, and then when I like was in high school, like and I like but I already knew like what all the classes were, and I knew
Mm-hmm.
what the spells were, and I knew who the people were, like, and all the things because I played the game. um so that was really satisfying. I'd say that's probably my number, like, number two, as far as just like the diversity of games that have come out of that, from like Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 to like Icewind Dale and
Mm-hmm.
um Pool of Radiance. I mean, and they had like Dark Alliance. They had all these, and Wizards of the Coast has taken that even further. And now we have the new Baldur's Gate that is very fun by Larian Studios. Um, that was all, you know, early Swords Coast stuff. What about you? What's your? I know that Fallout, which we will play
Yeah.
that. We are going to play that
Yes.
eventually. I think that'll be
100%.
really fun.
I think to
So
start off, yeah, to start off, Fallout is one of my favorite deep lore kinds of games that just keeps giving because part of the story does happen as you're playing, and you kind of have a narrative journey. For like Vegas, you're trying to figure out why somebody dumped you into a grave, what's going on there. Um, but what's nice is it's branching, and so you can go into and kind of open world where you can learn as much or as little of the world around you. So you get quests and you learn more stories about maybe the people of the Mojave. You get to learn who the Brotherhood of Steel are and all these different kinds of things. But what's nice is it does atmospheric storytelling as well. So occasionally you'll come across. So for those who haven't experienced Fallout universe, it is post-apocalyptia in a different timeline, and it's kind of the divergence point is they went into I think they
nuclear
didn't
energy was more
yes,
proliferated. Atom
instead of
punk, I
transit
think, is
yes,
the genre
yes,
of
and instead of
aesthetic.
transistors, so everything's big and bulky, and the nuclear holocaust came, and there were vaults to kind of protect some people and not others. But spoiler alert, the vaults were not good. There were experiments run by Vault-Tec that were wide and varied in nature, trying to figure out what human nature is, all that good stuff. And so a lot of the vaults, however, don't have people in them. And so you get to learn the stories from kind of diaries left behind in the computers, just kind of the setup of how like bodies are arranged or different kind of artifacts left behind. And so you learn the story by just kind of looking and exploring. And I think that's been one of my favorite things because if you're not paying attention, you can do all the game. But then if you go back, and replayability, I think, is really high because you get to be like, oh, what? Oh, this was messed up. Oh, this was horrible.
Mm,
And these things happen. And then you get to learn about that. So I love an atmospheric storytelling kind of story because it's a little bit more mystery. I love a puzzle. I love exploring kind of, you know, different things that aren't just necessarily handed to me. And sometimes I love something that's handed to me as well.
yeah.
Uh it sometimes I'm
It's
just like,
that
just read
that
it out.
pass off. I mean, because there is, like, again, that the sort of lore master of a game is such an interesting way to build a community. It's like
Mm-hmm.
not only are you in dialogue with like the people who are making the game, and like, basically, being you're patronizing them by purchasing the game, and then it becomes this matter of like, hey, I'm exploring this world that you created, and you did all these really cool things. I mean, the Dark Souls games and everything, the sort of
Oh yeah.
interrelatedness of all these sorts of storylines that aren't obvious but are
Mm-hmm.
told environmentally, um,
And then
becomes
I
that
think,
that
yeah, yeah,
the balance of those, like
yeah.
how much deep lore do you have versus lore that's a bit more accessible and a bit more, I guess, media oriented.
Mm-hmm.
uh,
I think if we go back kind of a classic one, there's JRPG called Suikoden, and you can get up to 108 characters on your side. And I think what I really liked about that is it's very character driven lore and character driven stories where you're kind of exploring the world around you. You're finding allies. There's an overarching story of war and the kind of consequences of how war affects people not just directly involved in it, or like from the ground perspective, and just kind of how it can shift and change. And then there's like a lot of magical lore of different there's the 28 true runes, which you're just like, what is this? What's going on, and the powers that give. So it's nice, kind of. It's a little bit more. You get the story, and then the fighting is just JRPG style. Like you're all in the line, you all do things, which is a lot of fun, and I enjoyed that a great deal. But getting into so many different characters and the reasons why, and some of them are on your side, some of them aren't on your side.
Yeah.
Two in particular is genius, because it has your best friend joining a different faction than you, and you have to grapple with somebody who you love and trust very much for equally good reasons, joining a different side and trying to like navigate, like, I'm right and you're right and this really sucks, so how do we get to
Mm.
a better place. And so that kind of conflict, in like being able to experience that conflict in a very safe storytelling kind of way, where I'm like, okay, I can make three choices maybe, or just stay silent as the silent protagonist, which I always appreciate. Just the dot dot dot. Um, uh it's so fun to be able to experience, like, and that was just reading. That was just like, I was just reading so much text on the screen, like, okay, it was like a book. And they have put out manga and other things since then for it, but I love experiencing the world and building up my little like town. Another atmospheric thing is the more characters you get, the more your town kind of grows, or your castle grows, and the more
Oh,
services are
okay.
offered. So it was a nice little delight. I like that one.
That makes me think of what is it? Dark World, World of Darkness. There was a really cute little game where you would go in. It was like a little Zelda esque, but like with more equipment and leveling up weapons instead of your character. And you would go into this little thing and you would collect parts of the city, and like you would
Mm.
build, like it would be people or things because they were all contained within some orbs, or I forgot what that's called, but
Yeah, I love a good city builder.
yeah,
And I
the
I think, yeah, it's one of those things that like kind of progression is fun, and like kind of you start off like a little bit and then you kind of nibble off more.
and are able to make the decision as to like how much are you biting off to chew,
Yes.
um,
Maybe not
instead
too
of
much these days. Yeah, I need more simple, like those comfort core stories where it's just like, nothing bad is going to happen to me. I can relax. All is well. I think that's the nice thing about games, is the variety of stories is, as like, and like over any genre, over any theme, vibe, tone you want. There's a game for that. There's a mechanic that, and within those like games, there's a variety of mechanics, variety of levels. So if we're going back to horror, like I think you can have a wide variety of video games. You can have a wide variety of TTRPGs. It's a very popular genre, but also in the same way, there is Stardew Valley games. There's Stardew Valley-esque TTRPGs where it's just very comforting. Like I think Wander Home, not the same kind of uh, store like farming kind of aspect, but Wander Home is a very cozy comfort game
I mean
where
I mean it's journey,
you're
it's
just
just
journeying. Yeah,
you're taking a stroll, you're
yeah.
going,
And there's not combat. It's just you're trying to figure out encounters and going and explore. I love it. So there's all kinds of good stuff, I think, storytelling vibe wise.
I mean, and I think that again, that attachment to these tropes, to these stories that we tell. I mean, Wander Home could be seen as like, oh my gosh, a Frog and Toad simulator.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my,
I mean, again, or
you
Winnie the
could.
Pooh simulator. I mean, again, the
Mhm,
idea being that like it adds this ability to engage with the
mhm,
medium in a way that you're just I mean, again, we can play pretend. We play
mhm.
like kids play pretend all the time. Adults play pretend all the time. All sorts of different games and things like that. But again, the idea being that you can, oh man, Wander Home as a future low stress high mayhem game would be so cool. Um,
It's low stress, low mayhem.
Low stress, low mayhem.
Well,
low
we'll see.
low
We can
stress,
make some
low
skins.
low stress, no mayhem.
Yeah, okay. We're gonna be very kind.
Yeah. Oh, that would.
Uh,
And that would be, yeah, that would be a good,
I,
just
I
sort of vibes.
I
So
think that's one really, really cool thing you talked about, Toad and Frog, that RPGs in particular in the gaming sphere are
shenanigans.
wonderful for the specific, like, you can take your favorite book and you can play that as an RPG. There's always a way to hack like your favorite story and like, or bring characters in. Like, what was it? Strahd is just, Dracula.
Yeah.
Like, you're punching Dracula in the face.
You like Twilight? Come on, like come on, play some D&D.
But yeah, I think that if you're thinking about TTRPGs, I think you could definitely make it easy on yourself. And I need to remember there's some guides on how to do this really well, but you can take like the stories you love from Sherlock to Sleepy Hollow to even Power Rangers, and you can put those into either a rule set that people are familiar with, or and just kind of take the basics part of those stories that people love, the kind of triumph, like found families or triumph over evil, or all that, put it into a game, TTRPG, or you can find specific games that hack those stories. And it's
Hmm.
nice because then you have less work on the back end as a librarian, because I know we have too much to do all the time, so you can't always build that epic narrative that you want to for like a TTRPG, but you can just instead be like, look, I'm gonna hack Shrek. It's gonna be Shrek. I'm just gonna take out the names, and this is a story about somebody who's kind of you're like, your characters are donkey trying to get this like sad creature out of the swamp, and at the end of the day, it's the friends you found along the way, all that good stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And again, there's like diversity of genres. There's a Shrek role playing game.
There is, okay,
Of course. I mean,
of
if you
course,
could,
there's
if
everything.
it, yeah, yeah, yeah. Everything is a repost. Oh man, that's so great. And just it also affords an amount of uh, how can I be as pretentious as possible about it? Of like cognitive uh, relaxation
Mm-hmm.
when you're able to engage with similar messages or ideas in different media. So, like,
Yes.
in the sense that, like, granted, it shouldn't always, like, hustle culture is pretty toxic in terms of just, like, gotta always be hustling for more resources. But I do think that we can have a vibrancy to our sort of relaxation or media consumption. And, like, that's a cool thing about the sort of, like, spaces that libraries can create is that with these games, being able to attach um, old lore or I mean even just like basic like being able to practice reading by playing a game
Yeah.
but like reinforcing again those sorts of examples of like um, uh, say putting the narrative of uh, a what's a historical event? I mean, or even playing a game like Monster Prom,
Hmm.
and then learning, but also reading books about like where did the Mummy come from, or where
Yeah.
did like all of
I
these.
love how we went from let's pick a historical event to like, no, let's not.
Yeah,
There's so
yeah. I
many
was
things.
because it was always going to be World War II. That's the only video games I could, and I.
There are so many. There is one game, I think World War I game, where it's like you're just in the trenches and it's beautifully rendered, like kind of like great saturation, but then you're like, I don't want to be here anymore. This is not a fun war. Oh, that's the point. That's
Yeah.
the
Oh
point.
no.
War's
Oh
war's
no. I got
bad.
the message way too soon.
Yeah, there's I think a lot of games that do that very, very well. There's one I'm thinking of that I can't remember, where like you're in the middle of a war that has no name, and then you're just kind of having to survive. You have absolutely no powers. This is not a power fantasy. You're just trying to scrounge around and like get more, like enough resources to live, and it's like war sucks. And it's like, yes, the entire message, you got it. The video games do a very good job, I think, sometimes of the story, like stories with messages, like the moralistic stories, like sometimes can be told much more poignantly through a video game that you're living and experiencing in, and like all your choices are bad choices. It's like you kind of like,
Mm.
versus when you're reading, you're like, oh, that maybe if I was in that situation I would do something differently, versus a game, every choice is a bad choice, and then that's how you kind of re-emphasize that point. There's a story about a game. It doesn't really have too much of a story aspect to it. It was just my brain kind of doing brain things, but it's about loneliness, and you're just a tiny little cube, and you're like, oh, I'm a cube, and you can move around in this kind of black screen, and eventually you see other little white cubes, and you're like, ooh, I'll go next to them, and then the other cubes go away, and then you try to approach another set of like another three set of cubes, and you're like, oh, they went away too. And then every time you approach, the cubes scatter, and it's like, I'm the monster. I've
Oh
ruined their lives,
dear.
and I am the problem.
I'm the
And so,
bad guy.
at towards the end of the play, I was like, I wouldn't go near anybody because I didn't want to be a bother to them. And that is one of the most poignant kind of experiences I've had in a game. And I'll try and add it to the resource document. But it was a game about loneliness and about how, like, you feel like you can't approach people, or people, like, you eventually stop trying because every experience ends in, like, kind of heartbreak and disaster, with
Hmm.
just cubes. Like, what a
Yeah.
brilliant
Oh,
game.
that's wild. That's wild. Was Gord? I don't think it was this. I'm trying to remember when I talked about it. I was talking over myself so much during the whole stream. Um,
Well, we have a resource document that it will be in the chat that will get, like, updated. It's kind of a living document as we remember to put in the things that we're chatting about now.
yeah, it'll probably
Uh,
be. I'll probably end up rewatching the stream and then be like, "Oh yeah, this was the game I was
yeah,
thinking of."
that was the thing. Because I think we both play so many games. I think it's our big passion and love. So it's like some of them get scrambled in my head. I'm
And
like,
also
what's
just
that?
not
Yeah.
remembering names very well, I think, is
Hmm.
a huge part of that.
But I will remember a story. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's a lot with Slavic folklore. There's a lot
It
of,
does
I think.
look really cool.
Yeah, yeah.
um, yeah, city building and survival. Um,
I love it. I love it.
yeah, that again. Yeah, that I mean, again, the accessing that sort of um, that diversity of consumption.
Hmm.
Again, like being able to think about it in so many different ways.
And
Um,
also, I think
and
culturally, like,
experience it.
because everybody tells stories in different manners and different ways.
Hmm.
Like, if you think about a Miyazaki film with a lot of long, poignant pauses where, like, the movie and film get to breathe, versus, like, some of our American animation where it's just gung ho the entire time. There's cultural differences in games and how games are played, and kind of the onus of the storytelling, like what they're trying to project in stories. So I think that's another really good thing about games that we can access, is like, do we want to kind of dive into a different culture? Like, let's look at the games they play. Let's look at how they kind of set up story within those games, and how that's very different than what is important in the stories in, our particular home culture.
Yeah, I mean another a medium for communication component, especially and yeah, and but being able to use that as a way to get an even better, again, a higher resolution picture of that culture based on like the sorts of games that they play.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
a good example would be kind of it's a derogatory name, but a Merry Trash, kind of the
Oh.
Harbo Parker Brothers, like,
Yeah.
it's Monopoly style games. It's Sorry, it's all those things where we are in direct competition against each other. Nobody's gonna have fun except the one winner, really, and we're going to, like, be very combative about it. Versus a Euro style game where, while we might be competing against each other, there's generally, like, kind of a goals that we're trying to achieve that other people don't know, that can kind of make it so that, like, we're competing in a more gentle kind of way. Not all the Euro based games, some of them are quite cutthroat, but I'm thinking maybe
Yeah.
like a Catan, not Catan, but like um
It's still pretty cutthroat.
yeah, yeah, still pretty cutthroat. That one's actually, that's not a good example. But there are Euro games where it's like you play the games, and then at the end all the points are scored, and then it's like, okay, that we all tried to get towards that and things happened.
Yeah,
But
Italian games. Yeah,
yeah.
that is a really good point. Yeah, and I mean, and in general, the sort of, I mean, TTRPGs, you can look at those in terms of this sort of priority of a type of interaction. I mean, we brought up Wanderhome again before. I
Hmm.
mean, that sort of uh, the difference between a well, I don't know. I mean, I think that would be such an interesting
Yeah, I think Wanderhome
ethnography
is
of,
Possum Creek, so American maybe,
or Canadian. Is Possum
Canadian
Creek
maybe.
Canadian?
We'll have to look that up. But it would be interesting to see the difference in RPG, because I know there's a lot of Japanese RPGs
Yeah.
that are coming over. There's one about very Wanderhome like in that you're there's dragons and it's really a
It's New York.
Ryutama, I believe,
Rio
and it's like it's a not once again non-combative game. But if we're thinking about story, it's always kind of there's a also a meta narrative of there's the people who get to tell stories. Like if you think of the big companies like Hasbro and stuff, Wanderhome is US based. Thank you, E Brown. If you think about like who gets to tell stories, like if you think Dungeons and Dragons has the largest share of the market right now as far as kind of their way of telling ARPG,
Hmm.
and the
Mm-hmm.
format they have, which is it's definitely a combat style game. You're going against monsters. There's an good and evil axis that exists that we are like, and then there's people who tell stories against the like create stories against those stories. So it's like combating that narrative of like does a game have to be combative? Can we have a collaborative game? Can we have a collaborative TTRPG? Can we have a TTRPG where we don't fight, where we don't level? And the answer is yes. Like lots of people have like spoken in that narrative and said like this is what we believe games exist for all people and all walks, and like it's not just the idea that Wizards of the Coast has for games. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of a neat kind of meta narrative to like the story of games, especially I think particularly I'm talking about North America in my mind, but also there's games from all over. I think RPGC is a hashtag where people in Southeast Asia are making their own kinds of games and like from their own perspectives and narratives and understandings of how the world works. So I think that's super cool stuff.
Yeah, and how to represent that. I mean, again, yeah, just such a great way to, I mean, get you know a type of insight into how, or and again, it's not comprehensive, but the idea being that you can get a more a more
Yeah.
generalized idea of like, I mean, just beyond even people and that sort of cultural component. It really fascinates me too in thinking about how, I mean, in general, I mean, I know this is a general media phenomenon, but like the readaptation of things and how like that can become, um, a, I mean, in and of itself, seeing the change in, like, I mean, exactly what you were talking about, the change in sort of the meta narrative of what is tabletop gaming in the United States? Is it just Dungeons and Dragons? Um, but that the sort of that I guess it's just a general question of like that shift happening. I'm like thinking
Mhm.
about it historically, like what did that look like? Because I mean, there's
Oh yeah.
games
It,
historians out there,
oh yeah.
so
Games historians hit us up. We have webinars. You can definitely tell us and expand upon any of these ideas. We're more than happy to work with anybody
yeah,
that loves games and scholarship.
yeah.
And I think the thing that's really interesting is in if you think about games as a whole genre, like just big encompassing like playing lot video games has a lot of different styles of video games. There's a million different ways from Stardew to Destiny. There's all kinds of things in between. And then there's a lot of different board games as well. But then we get into TTRPG and it's such a dominant market on like this is what we think it's Dungeons and Dragons seems synonymous and it's like it feels weird to have like when you look at like the continuum of games how diverse they are and then we pop into TTRPG and it's like it feels like there should be like and it's happening now I believe like the industry is or and people designers are moving towards a wide variety of different play styles and different games and different storytelling mechanics and all kinds of wild west stuff. Go to itch.io, there's some wild stuff on there, my
Yeah, yeah.
friends. So I'm hoping that the TTRPG industry also kind of moves in the same direction as all the other different kind of subgenres or like different categories of games in that it opens up to because we've talked about this in our micro RPG section where it's like there is a game for every player, but it doesn't always seem like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 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 yeah. It's still kind of figuring that out. That's really well put. Yeah. Oh
Thank you for
man,
letting me talk so much, Russell.
man, this is dope. This is great. I mean, it's just in general, again, the sort of, exploration of, I mean, again, I think that in a similar sense, we are playing the game of creating GameRT's Twitch channel, and in that sense, like the exploratory aspect of games, and in this case, the sort of again reflecting not just on um, the sort of idea of lore as a thing for a specific game or anything, but the idea of lore and narrative as a distinctly different manifestation in games. Like,
Yes.
again, that's just really fun to talk about and think about how it's done so much differently. So should
Yeah.
we, I
We should
think kind of we found a good way
I
to.
think we found a good
Yeah.
ending because we have a couple announcements still. Once again, we're running a charity stream. I see that we've had a donation. Thank you, kind soul who has donated to us. If you'd like to donate, it is in the chat. We will be adding donate. I'm missing Rebecca because she's usually, as we're talking, popping things up. We have our tech crew of two today. But yes, we are running a charity stream for Extra Life. If you'd like to donate to that, help change kids' health, change the futures. We will be taking a lunch break from 1 to 2, so that way you can rest, recuperate, and then we'll get back into the storytelling because we will be doing a low stress, high mayhem version of the game Mythology
Mythology.
within the Ultimate Micro RPG. Nope, nope. It'll come back. Anyway, Micro RPG book by James Diamato. It is a small 2-page RPG about creating a entire mythos using tarot deck. So that
It's
should be
gonna
a
be
lot of fun.
cool. It's gonna be
And then
cool.
after that, we are going to play a little bit of Core Keeper, about 2 hours, and see how far we can delve into the mines and figure out all the little different shenanigans. Because both Russell
Deuce.
and I have not played this,
It
so
looks so
it'll be a
cute.
delightful
It
surprise.
looks so
Yeah,
cute.
yeah. So thank you so much for joining us. Come back in an hour. We really appreciate your time and attention,
All
and
right.
see you in a
See y'all
little.
in a few.